In March 1981, Daniel and Lorraine Whitaker boarded a luxury cruise ship for what was supposed to be a romantic, long, overdue vacation. 4 days later, they vanished. Without a trace, no bodies, no witnesses, just a pair of untouched wine glasses, a balcony door left open, and silence. The cruise line claimed they fell overboard. The investigation was quietly closed, but 19 years later, deep below the Caribbean Sea, a U.S. Navy submersible stumbled across a sealed cargo container lying half buried in coral inside. Evidence that would unravel the original story and suggest the Whiters never fell at all. They were taken before we uncover what the Navy found. Like this video and subscribe to our channel, because sometimes the waves don't just swallow people, they bury secrets. A honeymoon that wasn't. Daniel and Lorraine were no different than any middle-class American couple. In 1981, married. In 1973, they lived in Cincinnati, Ohio, where Daniel worked as a systems technician for a defense contractor. Lorraine taught English at a local community college. They had no children, no known enemies, and a quiet suburban life, which made their sudden decision to book a 7-day Caribbean cruise aboard the MS Ocean Gala a bit surprising, especially to Lorraine's sister. Emily Lorraine never traveled. She hated the ocean, Emily later said. So when she called me and said they were taking a cruise, I knew something was off. The Ocean Gala departed from Miami on March 5th, 1981, bound for the Virgin Islands and Barbados. By all accounts, Daniel and Lorraine kept to themselves on board. They signed up for no excursion, spent most of their time in the library or walking the upper deck after dark. But something was building by day. 4 other passengers noticed tension between the couple. A bartender remembered Lorraine asking strange questions about ship access areas. A steward recalled Daniel locking a drawer in their cabin, then pocketing the key at the captain's gala dinner. That evening they appeared unusually cheerful, dancing, toasting with wine. And then at 11:08 p.m. CCTV caught them walking hand in hand toward the sun deck. That would be the last time anyone saw Daniel and Lorraine alive. The empty cabin. The next morning, the steward on duty knocked on her cabin door with breakfast. No answer. The room was unlocked. Inside, untouched bed sheets, 2 wine glasses, Lorraine's handbag resting on the chair, Daniel's wallet on the dresser, with all cash missing but credit cards untouched. More strangely, the cabin's balcony door was wide open, and a pair of sandals sat neatly beside the entrance. No notes, no struggle, no sign of forced entry. Security was alerted. The captain initiated an emergency sweep. The vessel helicopters were dispatched from the nearest Coast Guard station, but nothing, not even a ripple, turned up by days, and the ship's captain issued a statement. It is presumed that the couple went overboard during the night in what appears to be a tragic accident. Closed without closure. The case was never treated as a criminal investigation. No foul play was formally suspected. No body meant no autopsy. And the cruise line was eager to avoid publicity. The final incident report sent to the family was just 3 pages long. It cited probable accidental drowning. Lorraine's sister, Emily, wasn't satisfied. There was no autopsy, no effort to recover the bodies, just a file closed, a stamp, and a shrug Emily had stayed close to. Lorraine, before the trip, she knew something was wrong. 2 weeks before the cruise, Lorraine had confided that Daniel was involved in something at work that made her nervous. She had mentioned hearing him speak in code, a black leather notebook she wasn't supposed to touch, and a call late one night that made him leave the house in silence. She said it was just government stuff, Emily recalled, but she looked scared. The hidden cargo. But here's where the story starts to shift. At 2:17 a.m. the same night, the Whiters disappeared. Internal manifest showed a classified diplomatic container was logged for emergency storage in the Ocean Gala's cargo bay. No name was attached, no recipient listed. The only identifying tag, Nest Octane Level 3, do not open. Strangely, the next day the manifest was updated, and the container was no longer listed. No entry, no exit. It simply disappeared until 19 years later the Navy dived in late 2000 during a U.S. Navy training mission using deep-sea recovery drone sonar picked up a non-natural metallic object on the ocean floor, roughly 180 nautical miles from the spot where the Ocean Gala was reported to have been when the Whitakers disappeared. When the drone's camera lit up the object, divers confirmed it a 6-foot steel diplomatic container, intact, sealed, slightly dented inside. They expected to find sensitive communications equipment. Instead, they found something no one could prepare for. Part to the cargo. No one claimed the Navy's discovery when the U.S. Navy's unmanned submersible ROV-24 located the steel container in early 2000. It wasn't supposed to be part of the operation. The mission was a deep water sonar calibration exercise, purely routine. The container rested half-buried in silt encrusted with marine growth, its only markings a faded stencil reading NSC Octane Level 3, and a warning below, "Do not open federal property." After confirming the location, divers were dispatched. The container was sealed with a double-barrel mechanical lock, system of kind used only for diplomatic transport by U.S. and NATO forces during the Cold War, yet no agency, including the State Department or Pentagon, could identify the shipment or would Naval Intelligence requested retrieval. But that's where things started to go silent. The divers' report chief, Petty Officer Joel Sweeney, was one of the first divers on the scene. What he saw when the container was open would haunt him for the rest of his career. Inside, 2 vacuum-sealed body bags, a rusted black notebook, a decomposing leather handbag with initials LW, and a voice recorder No. Official inventory was released to the public. The contents were classified, but a week later Sweeney handed in a medical discharge for what was described as acute psychological stress. He moved to Montana and never spoke publicly again. The notebook, while the Navy refused comment information, began to leak. A civilian defense contractor, Angela Crane, who had worked on sonar pattern analysis with the Navy for over a decade, was hired to examine frequency anomalies near the crash site, but in one internal email later leaked to a journalist, she wrote, "Whatever was in that container wasn't military hardware. It was meant to disappear. But someone knew where it was all along. The positioning of the object matches are controlled. The Senate didn't fall. It was placed." Angela made a formal inquiry for access to the notebook found inside. 3 days later, her security clearance was revoked. 1 week after that, she vanished. No credit card activity, no phone records, no trace, just a voicemail left for her sister at 3:12 a.m. They were on that ship. They knew something. "This goes way higher than we thought. If anything happens to me, check the Whitaker file." The voice recorder whispers. A recovered voice recording inside the container made their way to the public thanks to a congressional staffer who anonymously provided a partial transcript to an investigative blog. The recording was reportedly time-stamped March 9th, 1981. 1:12 a.m. It began with static, then Daniel Whitaker's voice. "They've locked us in. Lorraine is hurt. If anyone finds this, the container was never supposed to be open. I copied the codes. I hid them in the notebook. Tell Emily. Don't trust the company. Don't trust the contractor. It's all about octane." Then the audio cut out the last sound, Lorraine screaming. What was octane? The term octane appeared multiple times in recovered files, including on the container, labeled Daniel's note, and Angela Crane's communications. Declassified military memos from the late 1970s mention octane as a multinational logistics protocol used to transport sensitive diplomatic and scientific materials discreetly via private shipping routes. But in 1981, a black-budget subdivision of this protocol, Octane Gray, appeared. Its purpose still redacted. The only unclassified footnote read, "Octane Gray operates outside naval jurisdiction clearance only via NSC Tier 5, which meant whatever the Whitaker stumbled upon had national security implications, and likely included civilian contractors embedded in cruise lines." Connecting the dots, a timeline began to take shape. March 5th, 1981, Daniel and Lorraine board the MS Ocean Gala. March 8th, a classified container octane log aboard, and hidden March 9th, warm 12 a.m. Daniel. Records of message both go missing hours later. March 10th, cruise logs show the container's ID number is wiped from the manifest. March 12th, the Ocean Gala returns to Miami. No public statement made when the ship, docked a private logistics truck non-branded, was allowed into the port and logged under Department of Commerce code. The plate number is now unreadable, but it's suspected the container was meant to be removed instead due to unknown events. It was jettisoned at sea. Why and by whom? Emily's file back in Ohio. Emily Whitaker, Lorraine's sister, received a knock on her door in the fall of 2000. A man in uniform handed her a sealed envelope, no name, no return address. Inside, a copy of Lorraine's cruise photo with Daniel, a torn page from a notebook, a fragment with the words, "Trust no one," and Deck 4 maintenance duct. A cassette tape blank labeled. She sent the tape to a local radio tech for restoration. Only one section could be recovered. It was Lorraine's voice. "We know now. Daniel copied something. They're watching us. If this reaches you, Emily, tell them we didn't fall." Emily turned tape over to a private investigator. Within a month, her phone was tapped. She stopped speaking to the press. She moved 3 times and refused to discuss the case again. Part 3, a ship built for more the Ocean Gala's true purpose to the thousands of vacationers who boarded her between 1976 and 1985. The MS Ocean Gala was a floating paradise. Spa treatments, fine dining, a casino, and nightly ballroom dancing beneath chandelier light. But in the months after Daniel and Lorraine's disappearance, independent investigators began asking a troubling question: why did a cruise ship have encrypted communications hardware in its maintenance deck? And more importantly, why did a U.S. Navy contractor own part of it, follow the ownership? In 2001, a declassified financial audit from the Department of Maritime Affairs revealed that the Ocean Gala wasn't fully owned by the cruise line. In fact, 22% of the ship's asset structure was held by a shell company registered in the Cayman Islands, Ether Limited Maritime Holdings. Further digging traced Ether's paperwork to a private defense contractor, Helix Systems International, a logistics and information technology firm frequently subcontracted by both the Department of Defense and the National Security Council. Throughout the Cold War, Helix's specialty mobile, high-security containment, and long-range covert surveillance. Why would a company like that invest in a Caribbean cruise ship unless that ship wasn't just for tourists? A ship within a ship. One former Helix employee, under anonymity, claimed that the company installed Tier 3 storage bays aboard the Ocean Gala mast as cold storage and backup refrigeration. These were essentially armored containers bolted inside the hull, hidden from standard maintenance logs. There was an entire protocol for moving packages mid-voyage. The whistleblower said packages that bypassed port customs, stuff that wasn't meant to be declared. Most voyages ran smooth until March 1981. That month, an octane gray classified package was rerouted from a canceled military transport vessel due to mechanical failure, and instead diverted through the Ocean Gala unmarked, undeclared, shielded. The Whitakers likely never knew it was there until Daniel saw or heard something. He wasn't meant to. Daniel's job comes into focus back in Ohio. Daniel's former employer, Tarsus Communications, filed for bankruptcy in 1982. It was a small military contractor specializing in signal encryption and satellite relay hardware. What seemed like an ordinary IT job came into sharper focus. One of Daniel's co-workers, under alias, told a reporter in 2003 Daniel was working on something sensitive, something about maritime communication, delays, encryption, ping windows, the kind used for quiet relays, like when you don't want anyone knowing a message was sent. He described Daniel as nervous, and in early 1981, he allegedly said, "If anything happens to me, check the float roads. They're hiding things in the waves." Deck 4, the duct clue. Remember that note found in Emily's envelope? Deck 4 maintenance duct investigators tracked down an original floor plan of the Ocean Gala's layout in maritime records. Deck 4 was not accessible to passengers, but one narrow corridor used by cleaning staff and engineers had a ductway that ran between cold storage and auxiliary power conduit. In the months following the Whitakers' disappearance, that entire section was sealed off due to a pressure failure. No repair logs were filed. No one ever accessed again. It was quietly removed during the ship's refit in 1986, a year before the Ocean Gala was sold to a European tourism company. Coincidence, or clean up a ghost ship's legacy? In 2004, a retired engineer named Marcus Belling, who had worked on the Ocean Gala's dry dock renovations, contacted an independent podcast producer with a chilling recollection. "I saw it," he said. "That vault hidden behind a false panel in the ductway, bolted in like a panic room, sealed, and we were told not to go near it." Marcus claimed that a Helix contractor personally supervised its removal, transported off the ship by helicopter. He believed it was part of the same container that ended up on the ocean floor. And when shown a picture of Lorraine Whitaker, he froze. "She was the one who came down asking questions, I remember, because she called me sir, and asked where cold storage was. She looked nervous." The cruise line denies everything despite mounting evidence. The cruise line that operated the Ocean Gala in 1981, now under a new name, released only a single statement: "We have no record of unusual cargo, missing persons, or contractor access outside standard service agreements. The safety and privacy of our passengers remains our highest priority," their legal counsel added. All claims from a 1981 disappearance were resolved, not solved. The pattern emerges. It wasn't just the Whitakers. In the years between 1979 and 1983, 4 additional disappearances were documented aboard similar vessels owned or partially funded by Ether Maritime, a journalist investigating offshore finance. In 1979, a foreign embassy assistant. In 1980, a retired naval officer. In 1982, and a tech courier en route to Bison. 1983. Each case ended with the same phrasing: presumed overboard, no evidence of foul play. Case closed. Each ship had one thing in common: octane-class cargo movement. During the voyage, closing in back in Washington, a newly elected senator from Oregon introduced legislation calling for a full inquiry into octane gray, The proposal was denied in subcommittee classified, but whispers say that a private intelligence group composed of former naval officers and freelance investigators has taken up the case. Their goal: find out what was really in the container and why two innocent people had to vanish. So it could stay hidden part for the crewmen's pages of voice from the deck. In 2005, nearly 24 years after Daniel and Lorraine Whitaker vanished, a man named Andres Calderon quietly reached out to a maritime journalist covering missing persons cases at sea. He introduced himself as a former junior crewman aboard the MS Ocean Gala, a dishwasher 21 years old at the time of the Whitaker's disappearance, and yet something no one else did. Pages torn from a secondary manifest log hidden in his belongings since 1981. Andres had been afraid to come forward for years, but after seeing a report about the Navy's deep-sea recovery, he knew he couldn't stay silent. They told us never to ask questions, he said, but I saw things at night. I can't forget the manifest that wasn't in cruise ship operations. There's a public manifest, what's given to authorities and insurance companies, and then there's what the crew call the dirty log. The second version tracks irregular shipments, late changes to cargo, and special items that don't go through customs. Andres claimed he found the torn pages stuffed in a waste bin in the engine corridor 2 days after the Whitakers disappeared. He thought little of them at first, but when rumors began to spread that 2 passengers had gone missing and a container had vanished, he held on to them. Decades later, he scanned and shared them. What the pages showed: there were 3 critical entries. March 6, 1981, cargo bay 31X octane gray temp seal, hold no customs declaration, routed via ether. March 4, 7, 1981, crew access, restricted deck for ductway closed maintenance, override, issued 1 non-contractor entry, reported March 9th. 1981, discrepancy noted. Item 3A missing from hold, relocated by Helix liaison. Each was initialed by someone named RV, later believed to be Richard Vallon, a Helix contractor who worked as a safety liaison aboard the Ocean Gala for 2 voyages. In 1981, Richard Vallon disappeared. In 1983, presumed dead in a boating accident off Puerto Rico. Nobody was ever recovered. Andres' testimony: when asked, we remembered most about the night Daniel and Lorraine vanished. Andres recounted this: I saw the woman Lorraine running from the upper deck stairwell. She was barefoot, looked scared. She had a black book in her hand, he said. She headed toward the staff corridor near the cold storage entrance. A man followed her, tall, not her husband, wearing a white jacket, but no name tag. Minutes later, the fire doors near deck 4 locked down. The next day, rumors swirled among the crew that someone had been caught where they shouldn't be. The senior staff told them not to speak of it, that was a domestic situation, and the authorities were notified they weren't. The cold storage discovery: another crew member, identified only as MA, submitted a statement in 2006 after hearing Andres' interview on a local podcast. He had worked in inventory during the 1981 season and recalled something unusual. 1 container in Bay 3 was sealed differently. It had its own keypad access, the kind we were never trained to use. A container, according to him, was loaded after the ship left port via a small supply vessel off the coast of Nassau in the dead of night. Unusual, absolutely unreported, deliberately. It was sealed shut the next day. No one logged it. Officially, it wasn't supposed to be there. 2 days later, it was gone. The crew was told it was relocated. They assumed it meant removed by chopper, but now we know it was jettisoned into the sea. The black notebook returns. Remember that Lorraine was seen holding a black book. That notebook was recovered by the Navy in 2000, but never released to the public. However, thanks to a FOIA Freedom of Information Act request filed in 2015, several redacted pages were obtained. Fragments of Daniel's notes included, never meant for civilian shipping. Maritime relay compromised. Octane linked to TAS satellite sequence. Why embed on cruise code 47C matches Helix port map, confirming handoff. Do not trust dispatch chain. Civilian cover act intentional. And 1 haunting line: if we go missing, it wasn't the ocean that took us. A pattern of disappearances. By now, patterns had emerged. Cargo rerouted without explanation. Passengers who knew too much vanishing. Mid-voyage logistics handled by Helix systems shielded by Ether Limited. Independent researchers began connecting the dots between cruises, mysterious shipping routes, and government agencies trying to deny involvement. A single phrase repeated across survivor testimonies: they vanished, without making a ripple, but ripples were forming now, and they were growing into waves. Andres' final word in a handwritten letter submitted to the Whitaker Case Archive in 2010. Andres closed with this: I didn't know them, but I remember her face. She looked back over her shoulder before. Turning the corner, that look haunts me. I should have followed her. Maybe I could have stopped at Part 5, the cargo above and below the cruise line. That wasn't in 1981 the Ocean Gala. Was registered under Mistral Voyages, a now-defunct luxury cruise operator headquartered in Panama, with offices in Miami and Rotterdam. But when an investigative team traced the registration and charter records, they uncovered something startling. Mistral Voyages had no legitimate business filings. Prior to 1980, and no active ships after 1985, its Miami office was a rented mailbox. Its Panama registration was signed by a proxy agent linked to over 24 other shell companies, all managed under a holding group tied to, you guessed it, Helix Systems International. Mistra wasn't a cruise line, it was a cover. And the Ocean Gala wasn't just a pleasure vessel. It was a platform of cruise with a purpose in internal documents later unearthed from a whistleblower leak. Helix Systems described its covert operations aboard commercial vessels as platformized logistics. The program allegedly used cruise ships and cargo carriers as mobile transfer points for data drives and communication nodes, biological samples, human intelligence. Assets of strategy was simple: hide in plain sight, use hydra vessels. No one checks a minier for state secrets. Each ship had what was called a gray locker, a compartment hidden inside maintenance or cold storage decks on the Ocean Gala. The gray locker was located, unsurprisingly, on deck, for near the same dock Lorraine was last seen entering the satellite relay scheme. In recovered excerpts from Daniel Whitaker's Black Notebook, he described something called a spectrum window hack as a defense contractor. He was familiar with military satellite frequencies, but on the ship he noticed strange delay patterns in public broadcast signals, static blips at regular intervals occurring every 11 minutes 32 seconds. Daniel's notes theorized the Ocean Gala was transmitting encrypted data packets during these interruptions. That meant the ship was being used as a relay node, bouncing sensitive information across global networks under the guise of weather interference. Why was that important? Because only someone on board with knowledge of encryption could have recognized the pattern, and someone like Daniel might have accidentally intercepted it. The crew's manifest revisited after Andres Calderon's testimony. A new analysis of the passenger manifest revealed something else strange. 3 passengers listed under the following aliases: John Wills, cabin 41, your Mark Duval, cabin 212, see Evelyn Shaw, cabin 40. 3B. None of these names appeared on customs records from Miami. None were reported missing. None had charges from shipboard services, and 2 of the 3 cabins were adjacent to the Whitakers. Emily, Lorraine's sister, confirmed. Lorraine said their hallway was always quiet, too quiet, like it was being watched. Were these passengers observers? Were they on board to monitor the gray locker and eliminate anyone who got too close to the disappearance of Evelyn Shaw? One crew staffer who worked as a cabin attendant in 1981 remembered something chilling. He claimed Evelyn Shaw was not a typical guest. She wore plain clothes, ate alone, never sunbathed. She asked about duct access on her second day, said it was for safety concerns. He also claimed she was one of the last people seen walking down the deck for a crew corridor before Lorraine vanished 2 days later. Evelyn disembarked in Barbados ahead of schedule. Her name never appeared on flight record, hotel bookings, or return lists. One maritime intelligence group now believes Evelyn Shaw was a contracted asset assigned to safeguard octane cargo. And silence witnesses a pattern of disposal. A former Helix security operative who requested anonymity later described how the company handled internal leaks. They didn't send agents to kill. That was too messy. They isolated, discredited, then arranged for an accident. People fall, drown, overdose, whatever fits the narrative. He described cases in 79, 81, and 83 where platform incidents were cleaned up under the guise of maritime tragedy. His chilling conclusion: if a passenger got curious, especially one with clearance, they didn't survive the cruise. Emily's confrontation in 2008. Emily Whitaker confronted a Department of Naval Logistics representative at a public hearing about maritime security. She held up a photo of Lorraine on the cruise and asked one question: why did my sister go on a cruise and come back in container? No one claimed she received no answer. But the next day, her mailbox contained a single item, a sealed envelope. Inside, one photo, Lorraine's Black Notebook, open scanned, a handwritten line. Underlined in red, this page was removed before the container was sealed. No return address, no message, just silence and fear. The hidden passenger theory. As researchers dug deeper, one theory emerged: Daniel and Lorraine weren't the only ones on board who knew something. There was a third person, someone embedded in the system, watching someone who sent that envelope to Emily. The theory goes Daniel intercepts a signal. Lorraine finds a container. They record a message, and someone, maybe Evelyn Shaw, intervenes, but another witness smuggles out the notebook page and 19 years later helps the Navy find a container. If true, that means someone inside Helix still wanted the truth to come out. Part 6, the decrypted files, a whisper from the inside. In 2010, a retired Navy analyst named Ruth Morgan reached out to a maritime journalist under strict confidentiality. She'd served 24 years with naval intelligence, specializing in encryption analysis during a closed-door assignment. In late 2000, shortly after the U.S. Navy recovered the mysterious container linked to the Ocean Gala, she had been tasked with examining a damaged cassette tape and a notebook marked non-military intelligence. Anomaly at the time, she didn't know the names Daniel or Lorraine, but now she couldn't forget them. I decoded one of the final pages in that notebook. She told the journalist it wasn't military tech. It was a record of warnings she didn't take any documents, but she did memorize part of what she read, and what she remembered changes everything. The final entry, according to Ruth, the final legible page in Daniel's black notebook, written in a frantic, nearly illegible hand, read as follows: "We are being watched. I counted 3 decks with repeat observers. Lorraine accessed a refrigeration bay. It wasn't cold. There was a secondary container inside, human size. When she opened it, she screamed. I got there a minute later. I saw what was inside, not military equipment, not smuggled drugs. It was a man alive, bound, masked. And he looked right at us." Lorraine said, "We need to report this." I said, "We won't get the chance." The rest was redacted in Ruth's file, but that entry suggests something unimaginable. The Ocean Gala wasn't just transporting cargo. It was holding someone who was a man for years. Theories range from kidnapped journalists to intelligence defectors being transported offshore, but Ruth hinted that the man in the container may have been a foreign operative, a captured asset no agency would admit to holding, or worse, an American caught in a black op gone rogue. One internal note from Helix Systems, leaked in 2011, mentions a subject referred to only as Payload 9B, ice-covered, breathing, stabilized transfer to platform, pending some believe Payload 9. B was a man Lorraine found. Others believe it was Daniel's code name. What's certain is that Lorraine opened something she wasn't supposed to. It wasn't empty. The tape speaks again. Ruth also helped recover an extended segment from the same cassette tape found in the Navy container. It had never been released publicly, but years later she played it back and jotted down what she heard. Distorted static. Daniel, they said, it was a diplomatic shipment. It's not. We saw him. He's not dead. Lorraine, they're coming. We have to go now. If we can get to the sat phone. Heavy footsteps. Unidentified voice. You shouldn't be here. Lorraine screams. Daniel, run. Lorraine, run. End tape. The tape confirms the two were not alone, and they were actively intercepted. This was no accident, no fall overboard. It was a removal. The Navy's silent hand, when asked why this wasn't made public, Ruth gave a tired, unsurprised response. Because it wasn't in the Navy's interest to expose a program they weren't even supposed to know existed. Because there was no winning side to this story. She claimed the entire operation was later sealed under a multi-agency confidentiality order labeled Classic Red Line. Even she wasn't supposed to speak of it after retirement. But one thing haunted her: a note attached to the final report. It read, 2. Civilians breach containment situation, neutralized, assets rebalanced. Emily's final push in 2012. Emily Whitaker submitted her 5th and final formal request to reclassify her sister's case from presumed accidental death to unresolved disappearance. Due to suspected foul play, it was denied once again, but this time something strange happened 1 month later. She received a single manila envelope in the mail. No return address inside, a photocopy of a classified Navy report, stamped redacted, do not copy. 1 paragraph left visible. Payload exposure occurred at 0411C2. Unauthorized parties visually confirmed. Subject emergency protocol enacted. Secondary disposal methods approved at 0426Z. Civilian records updated beneath that in faded red ink. No recovery necessary. The C does that for us. A message hidden in plain sight. 1 investigator noticed that the same report filed under the Office of Naval History was included in a maritime training module in 2003, with everything redacted except for 1 term octane payload event man, and directly below a location MS Ocean Gala Caribbean. C March 1981 status. Contains secondary loss, acceptable secondary loss, 2 people, Daniel and Lorraine, sacrificed to maintain the secret of who or what was in that container. Closing the loop, Ruth Morgan passed away in 2018. Before she died, she left behind a letter published posthumously by her family in a Journal of Whistleblower Testimonies. I broke the rules because they broke something sacred first. C doesn't keep secrets. It only delays them. What happened to Whitakers wasn't fate or a storm or bad luck. It was bureaucracy, fear, and silence. And now the silence is broken apart. 7 a passenger with no name, a photograph in the attic. In 2016, a woman named Cheryl Milner, whose mother had sailed aboard the Ocean Gala in March 1981, found a shoebox of old cruise memorabilia in her late mother's attic. Inside were cocktail napkins, itinerary printouts, and a Kodak envelope with 3 undeveloped. Rolls of film-curious Cheryl sent them, and among the images was a blurry shot of a dinner party captured on the 4th night of the cruise. There in the background sat Daniel and Lorraine Whitaker smiling. But across from them, almost perfectly framed in motion blur, was a third figure, a woman, in plain clothing, short cropped hair, no jewelry, no name tag. The date was March 8th. 1981, the night before they vanished. Facial recognition hits. Cheryl posted the image online, tagging it as Ocean Cruise Mystery. Couple which caught the attention of an independent maritime investigator named Kai Donnelly. He ran the third figure through facial recognition software. The results were unexpected. 98.2% matched to a woman listed in CIA archives as Alicia Shaw, status deceased, classification non-official, cover operative, last known operation 1980 Caracas. Alicia Shaw was presumed dead during an intelligence breach at the U.S. Embassy in Venezuela. She was never recovered, but now she was a photo dated nearly a year. Later on a cruise, smiling at Daniel and Lorraine. Why was she there? Kai's research led him to believe Shaw was not an ordinary operative. She specialized in logistic suppression operations involving recovery and disposal of sensitive materials and individuals, in short, cleanup. If Shaw was on that ship sitting with Daniel and Lorraine, she either was posing as a friendly contact to gain trust, was monitoring them until containment protocol was triggered, or had a different mission entirely. And the Whitaker's gotten away, but then something even stranger surfaced. The final cabin assignment, the ship's manifest, released in redacted form after multiple FOIA requests, listed a cabin adjacent to the Whitakers as unassigned security hold. Investigators assumed it was unused, but crew staffer from 1981 came forward anonymously in 2017 and stated that cabin wasn't empty. It was used as a relay station. I delivered a tray of food. There once was told not to speak about the woman who opened the door. Wasn't a guest. She didn't smile. She just said, "We're at capacity." He later confirmed she looked like Alicia Shaw. The passenger who got off early ship disembarkation logs from Barbados showed a last-minute departure by a female passenger using the alias Rebecca Lyons. No cabin listed, no credit card record, but her disembarkation was authorized using crew clearance. Not, guess what does that mean? She wasn't a passenger, she was embedded. And when the operation was done, she was extracted the same day. The Whitakers were declared missing. The same morning, the gray locker was resealed. A secret transfer, a declassified maritime satellite image from March 10th. 1981 showed a small vessel rendezvousing briefly with the Ocean Gala before it entered Barbadian waters. It wasn't Coast Guard, it wasn't local. The transponder ID was scrubbed, but recovered logs showed the vessel returned to Puerto Rico. Its only cargo manifest read 1 case, 1 personnel, 1 case, 1 operative. Shaw had been pulled out, and the case, presumably the container later found by the Navy, did not make it. Back, the cover gets thinner. By 2020, Helix Systems International, long suspected of organizing the Ocean Gala operation, was defunct. Its holdings were absorbed by a shadowy defense consultancy in Maryland. But one final whistleblower, a former compliance officer named Eric, released a document marked Operation Glidewire 381 Platform Shadow. For observer retained in it, 3 terms were listed: target intercept via social vector Shaw, payload compromised platform, redirected assets, expuned secondary. Exposure containment, successful civilian narrative. Engaged. This was as close as anyone ever got to official confirmation. The Whitakers weren't random victims. They were compromised witnesses. And Alicia Shaw, she wasn't there to protect them. She was there to make sure they never left. Emily gets the final word in a letter submitted to Congress in 2021 during a hearing on intelligence overreach and private contractor abuse. Emily Whitaker wrote, "My sister and brother-in-law were buried by silence, by the sea, and by a system designed to erase inconvenient truth, but I've kept her voice alive. And now, so have you." The committee did not subpoena any Helix executives. No official apology was issued, but the case was entered into federal record as unresolved intelligence-linked maritime disappearance. And that was more than Emily had ever hoped for. Part 8, the letter that warned her, the safe deposit box in March 2023, an attorney in Cincinnati received notification that a safe deposit box had remained unclaimed for over 40 years. It was registered under name Daniel Whitaker. Emily Whitaker, next of kin, was contacted and escorted to the vault inside. There were only 3 items: a black and white photo of Lorraine and Daniel in front of their house, smiling, a 514 inches floppy disk labeled TRX-47 root log, and a sealed envelope addressed to Lorraine in case I don't come back. The letter inside was dated March 2nd. 1981, 3 days before. Their cruise Daniel had written it by hand, and what it contained confirmed everything the letter. Lorraine, if you're reading this, it means I didn't get the chance to say what I needed to. I don't want you to worry, but I need you to know something isn't right. You remember those meetings at work, the ones I said were about satellite telemetry? That wasn't the whole truth. I found a set of protocols embedded in our comm software, ones that weren't part of the original spec. They redirect encrypted data via maritime platforms. That means ships, civilian ships, ones that don't get questioned. When I trace one of the nodes, I got a name I wasn't supposed to see, Octane Gray. I'm not sure exactly what they're moving, but I know it's not just information. There's been talk about sealed assets and non-citizen transfer scenarios. I know how that sounded. The last ping I traced bounced through a relay registered to the Ocean Gala. That's why I booked this on. I had to see it with my own eyes. I know it was supposed to be our time. I'm sorry I turned into this, but if anything happens, if I act strange, if I tell you to hide something, if I say we need to leave the deck, please trust me. And if I don't come back, keep the notebook safe. Tell Emily I'm sorry. The disk investigators later recovered the contents of the floppy disk. It contained raw satellite telemetry logs, packet traces, and a route map showing encrypted pings originating from the MS Ocean Gala, 2 cargo vessels flagged under foreign flags, and 1 military-adjacent support ship, all within the Caribbean corridor. The data confirmed Daniels claimed the Ocean Gala was being used as part of a ghost network built to quietly route sensitive data and perhaps cargo through waters outside normal jurisdiction. He didn't imagine it. He proved it, and they silenced him for the final entry in the notebook after the Navy recovered the container and preserved the notebook. One final entry, smeared and faded, was identified under infrared scan. It was dated March 9th. 1981, past 36A. Likely just before the events that led to their disappearance. They know I saw her face, the one from earlier. She smiled this time. It wasn't a friendly smile. Lorraine is sleeping. I told her I love her. If they open the container, they'll find the truth. If they open us, they'll bury it. But maybe not forever. If this gets out, don't let it stop with us, Justice. Or just the truth. Emily submitted the letter and disk to a civilian-led investigation group called Project Wake. Their findings were published in a detailed public report titled Disappearance in Plain Sight, the case of Daniel and Lorraine Whitaker. The report led to a motion in Congress to establish a review panel on classified contractor maritime operations. Blocked in committee, a short documentary aired on international media, viewed by millions, and the reclassification of the Whitaker case from lost at sea to unresolved intelligence-linked disappearance. No charges were ever filed. No one was ever arrested. But the story is now part of public record, and the silence has broken the sea. Gives back. In 2024, the U.S. Navy decommissioned the section of the Caribbean used for deep ocean testing. A final survey mission confirmed the container had shifted, split open. The only remaining items found on the seabed: 2 faded cruise name tags, D. Whitaker and L. Whitaker, and a waterproof pouch containing Polaroid photos of Daniel and Lorraine at dinner dancing and smiling. The pouch was sealed, as if someone meant for it to be found. Epilogue: the name lives on. In 2025, the University of Cincinnati established the Whitaker Center for Maritime Transparency and Intelligence Accountability. Using funds raised through crowd support and donations from anonymous sources, Emily attended the opening. Her speech was simple. They weren't just passengers. They were people who stood up when they saw something wrong, and for 19 years they were lost in the dark. But now we brought them home. If the story moved you, if it reminded you how easily the truth can be buried in the deep light, and subscribe to our channel, because the sea doesn't forget, and neither should we. Thank you for watching.